Evil West tries many things during its 13-hour campaign and fails terribly at most of them, except for its combat. While the writing is absolutely atrocious, the characters are painfully cliche, and the visuals look very dated, Evil West manages to deliver some excellent combat before it becomes incredibly repetitive.
I'm starting to question your qualifications for this job.
Those ass licking.
Evil West's gameplay outside of the combat is generally one note, and sadly its steampunk Wild West world, which I was hoping would be good, just didn't deliver what I was expecting. But underneath all the blood, grime and slimy leeches, the combat shines, and thankfully just when the fighting starts to get boring, the game ends. There's nothing really remarkable about Evil West, and you'll likely play it and forget all about it. The game is set in the 1800s. The Wild West meets steampunk world has collided with vampires, werewolves and leeches, oh my. And you need to stop all of this massacring before the whole world ends up in ruins. You play as Jesse Rentier, a vampire hunter that gets caught up in this latest mission to save the world. You see, vampires and monsters aren't really anything new in the world of Evil West. In fact, the Rentier Institute is an owned entity built on killing these creatures. They have been doing so for decades now, but the latest threat, for some reason, is bigger than anything the group has encountered in the past. I really want to say I cared about what was going on in Evil West, but sadly the game lost me halfway through. The characters are unlikable, which makes the cutscenes a bore. They also act like absolute morons most of the time while constantly bickering about nonsense in order to prove who is the bigger man than the next guy. People just don't act like the characters in this game, so I don't know why the team at Flying Wild Hog decided to write them this way. They are just the worst one-dimensional, dull, horrid cast I have seen in a game in a while.
Gather in such numbers, but I believe great progress calls for momentous celebration. Our efforts in the fight against the Sanguisuga's spread have too often been baffled by the creature's most insidious weapon, their so-called glamour.
It is hard to stay focused on the story because everything they said was like white noise after a while. All I know is that there was this brat girl who used leeches to transport blood somewhere, and there's a plant I went to get, and some other guy got sad and went somewhere else, so I went to go save him, and I fought a lot of vampires and bad guys along the way.
Right now, you should go see your father.
Don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's a decent story in here somewhere, but the game does a poor job telling it. The script is 90% ego boosting and 10% useful information. It just doesn't play out well enough to care. The weak writing aside, Evil West's gameplay goes between good and okay at times. There are 16 missions in total that play out in a linear fashion. Each mission took me to some unique looking location to do something else. Some missions were a lot longer than others, while some even tried to incorporate some sort of explorable hub. These missions had me running around to complete a set objective like destroying nests. I had to string up grappling points, break down barriers, and fight with enemies to reach all 5 of the nests. It wasn't anything wow, but these missions offered a nice break from the other linear progression types. Generally speaking, missions include a bit of exploration through side pathways before walking into fighting arenas and beating a whole bunch of bad guys up. There are some things to collect along the way too, including documents, bucks, which acts as the game's currency, and each stage includes chests that contain weapons, skins, and perks. Some perks can't be obtained without finding them in chests, which is pretty weird. You can't use a specific attack without learning how to perform it in a chest you find hidden away in a level. It is just a horrible mechanic. So unless you spend time wandering around mindlessly across these stages, you won't unlock every perk in the game. It also doesn't help that most sections in each mission lock you out of returning to an earlier area in the game. So while the ladder to get back to the platform is quite literally in front of you, Jesse refuses to climb it, meaning you can't go back at all. You also can't select the mission again until after you finish the game. It just baffles me that the developers decided to do this in the first place. You'll spend most of your time fighting enemies in Evil West, and that's where most of the fun is. Combat is gruesome and combines punching, uppercutting, shooting, and ripping apart creatures before they kill you. Jesse is equipped with some cool gadgets including a revolver, shotgun, crossbow, a cross that stuns enemies, and most importantly, his fists. Evil West also relies heavily on the element of electricity, and it plays a big role in the game's combat. Jesse can shock enemies with different electric ammunition and even teleport towards them using an electric dash. Everything you do that relates to electricity builds up a meter, and after a while will stun enemies. The stuns don't last very long, but it's the perfect opportunity to either punch away, heal, or find healing items around the floor. Mostly everything in Evil West combat has a cooldown, including the shotgun for some reason. I guess Jesse is just too lazy to simply reload it himself. So combat is basically about dashing around, punching things, shooting stuff with your rifle, and using all the various overpowered abilities like the shotgun whenever the cooler timer ended. It works, and near the end of the game, once I obtained every item, the combat was a lot more enjoyable than the start. Enemies also force you to play a specific way. Some are tanky and require more damage, while others fly around in the air. Jesse can also grapple flying and perch enemies towards him and use a super move that sees him dance around like a lightning bolt to smash everything around him. He can also get upgrades to his weapons and obtain a range of perks, both the ones you find in the boxes and the ones obtained by simply leveling up using XP. The perk tree can also be reset at certain times in the game, so you can rework your playstyle if you're getting bored. Jesse can also be spec'd out into various builds, including some that favor electric attacks over weapons. You can also spec into a punching maniac that buffs your uppercuts, slams and dashes. Of course, this will take collecting everything, which is already just a pain. Sadly, while the combat is the best part of Evil West, it does get repetitive too. Every mission introduced me to a new heavy hitter boss that sadly turned out to be just another goon I would face going forward. Flying Wild Hog also thought that spamming fights with a dozen of the same enemies in one field would make things difficult, and while it does, it is also just kind of annoying and unbalanced. I'm always up for a challenge, but duplicating the same enemy over and over again only for them to use the same attack over and over again isn't a challenge, it's just poor game design. Speaking of which, Evil West also doesn't run very well either. It is ridden with frame rate drops, nasty looking character models and even wonky animation. I did have fun at times in Evil West. The combat still felt great when the battles were carefully constructed rather than spammy. The actual boss fights were especially enjoyable. The general attacks, abilities and items felt great to use, and upgrading Jesse actually made a difference. However, everything else just wasn't as fun. The game starts out strong but slowly becomes a chore to get through. It doesn't help that everything good Evil West has going for it is slowly killed throughout the campaign. The characters become unlikable, the story is all over the place, and the combat, while being okay, becomes repetitive. So those are my thoughts on Evil West. Are you looking to pick this game up? Let us know in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching, and please do consider liking and subscribing for future content. Be sure to visit www.glitch.online for more gaming and tech news and reviews. And until next time, farewell.